Lee, you're an analyst at IHS. There'll be people out there in our market who don't fully understand the role of an analyst. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how IHS works?
Sure. So IHS Markit is a market intelligence company that sells research and data to the industry, in my case the tech industry. I work for a division of IHS Markit called the IHS Technology Division. And my coverage is in connectivity in the IoT. My specialty is low power wireless, and so I'm really looking into technologies like Zigbee, Z-Wave, Bluetooth Low Energy, the new LP-WAN standards, and these things, and I'm talking to all of the companies involved up and down the value chain with an emphasis on the lower end of the value chain, semiconductors, OEMs, and those sorts of things. And then I have the conversations with everybody in the industry. I'm doing interviews with people on a regular basis. I take that, compile it into an intelligence service that my customers subscribe to on an annual basis. And we try to keep just a continuous flow of market intelligence in their inbox. Market intelligence that they can use to make decisions about marketing, about new product introductions, about adjacent markets that they may be equipped to attack, just all sorts of things. We have market share information that they use to gauge their position in the industry. They may use that information for financial reasons in terms of an upcoming IPO or trying to appeal to Wall Street. There's any number of reasons people will use our intelligence, but that's essentially what I do.
Must give you a pretty good perspective on what's going on in the industry.
It really does, and that's actually, a lot of people think that our customers pay us for being accurate prognosticators of the future, and that's not really the case. They really, in my opinion, they're paying us for a perspective. In many cases, I talk to all of the companies, and so I talk to everybody's competitor, which that typically is not something that everybody can do, is pick up the phone and talk to their competitor. So I have a much broader perspective. I may not have as deep a perspective in their particular area as they do. They're in it 24/7, and they live and breathe that area, but that means they don't have time to look at other areas.
So perhaps you can tell us something about the key IoT trends that you've been seeing throughout 2016.
Okay. So I think it's been an exciting year for the IoT. From my perspective, one of the biggest things that's happening over the past year and really maybe over the past couple of years is the emphasis shifting in the IoT and connectivity from the very low-level physical layer and protocol stacks of the wireless standards up to the ecosystem level. And so the conversation today is more about HomeKit versus Android things versus Amazon's Echo, or the various ecosystems. And it's less so about Zigbee versus Z-Wave versus whatever the wireless protocol is, and interoperability problems among Zigbee devices, for instance. That is pretty much cleared up. So the interoperability in the smart home and the IoT in general is kind of working its way out from the bottom to the top, and we're making big progress. Another trend that we're seeing is we're starting to look at how to scale the IoT, and that is to get the IoT to the size that it eventually is expected to be, billions and billions, tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of devices eventually. The IoT has to be extremely scalable. It can't be, there can be no effort expended on deploying an individual node. Right. It has to be so scalable that you can just deploy thousands of nodes with the same effort it takes to deploy one node. And we're definitely not there, but we're getting there. And one of the things that's happened in 2016 that's going to help us get there is the emergence of these LP-WAN standards, the low power wide area networking standards. And they're going to bring a lot of that scale to the IoT. They're also bringing about a lower price point and enabling the industrial IoT, which is more remote, more dispersed, and where short-range wireless standards like Wi-Fi aren't really as applicable.
So LP-WAN has been something of a focus for you for a while, has it?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I just wrapped up with my co-author Sam Lucero 4 or 5 month effort in looking into that area. We interviewed 35 or 40 different companies and players in that value chain and published a report in December on LPWAN standards. And we covered, in that report, we covered some of the emerging proprietary private standards like LoRa and Sigfox are two of the most prominent ones, as well as some of the standards coming out of the 3GPP, Cat M1 and Cat NB1. And so we kind of, in the report, we examine, the unlicensed spectrum standards in LoRa and Sigfox versus the licensed spectrum standards from 3GPP, where the service providers stand in all of this, and how is the time to market advantage that the unlicensed spectrum guys have going to affect things. Area.
Well, it's interesting because LPWAN seems to be one of the few areas in IoT certainly, but perhaps in tech generally, where proprietary technology still seems to be maintaining some sort of traction on use of unlicensed spectrums. Can you see that continuing to be the case? I mean, if we think about it, it's very rare that a wireless technology has ever achieved ubiquity without being standardized or regulated.
Well, that's certainly true in the consumer area. But LPWAN is more, at least initially, it's expected to be more of an industrial kind of standard. And in the commercial and industrial spaces, they are more comfortable with proprietary standards. Not that that's their preference, but they're used to proprietary standards. And in some cases, that is their preference. They like to go to one vendor who can supply them a complete solution that they need. Everything is guaranteed to work together. And they may be locked into that vendor, but that's just a consequence of having a good working solution that is reliable.
I can see that, but surely, they understand that by tying themselves into one vendor or one technology, that business could go out of business. I mean, it's happened plenty of times before.
And the transition to standard protocols is occurring. It's slower in the industrial space.
Yeah, sure.
And they do see the advantages. They see the advantages to having a competitive dynamic among their vendors and in terms of cost, but cost is rarely the first consideration for an industrial deployment. It really comes down to more about reliability and long-term thinking. They want something to be deployed that can last 10 to 15 years without having to replace it or maintain it to a large degree. And so cost is part of it, standards are part of it, but they're looking at a bigger picture. And the LPWAN standards that are being proposed, even the proprietary ones, they're comfortable with. I have heard very few objections to the proprietary nature of them.
So, without asking you to give away too many secrets from your report, in your opinion, then the Sigfoxes and the LoRas of this world, they have some life in them, then?
They do. They do. It's still an open question how this is all going to play out, but they have room to run right now because the 3GPP standards are not ready.
So we've talked specifically about LPWAN, but let's finish off by looking at how you see general IoT developments mapping out over the next 2 to 3 years, Lee.
So I think there's going to be a lot of progress over the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to be an evolution. There's not going to be one miracle that causes a huge leap in the IoT in terms of the number of units or the usability or anything like that. But there's numerous activities going on right now that are all going to combine to push forward the IoT in the next 2 to 3 years. We mentioned LPWAN, and that's one big area that's going to help scale the IoT, and especially in the industrial side. On the consumer side, there's been a ton of progress there as well. The ecosystems at this point is where the work still needs to occur, and at the application level. To really realize the true potential of the smart home, we need applications and products from multiple vendors to all work together and share information, so that a thermostat from Nest can get data from a sensor made by a SmartThings sensor or a sensor made by another company that's in a different ecosystem. And so these are very difficult problems to solve, and they're essentially software problems, but they're also business decisions that need to be made by the companies to share information, to adhere to open standards, and this kind of industry cooperation is going to be necessary to take us to the next level.
And is the structure there? Have we got all the standards we need? Have we still got too many standards, or more consolidation to come? Or what do you think?
I think that we've got too many standards and not enough at the same time.
Right.
So I'm a big believer in kind of the natural selection process of the market, and the market's going to tell us which standards are going to live and which ones are going to die, and that process is already occurring. There are areas though where there's still standardization needing to occur, and I'm looking particularly at examples like Thread, where Thread was created with no application layer. It was just a missing layer that they just assumed somebody else would step in and fill. They eventually decided to partner with Zigbee and Zigbee's new dot standard to fill that layer. It's not an exclusive arrangement, so there's still other standards that could fit that layer. But there's a lot of work to be done, especially to wed the platforms to low power nodes that are battery operated. There's not been a lot of work there done by the new entrants, the Googles and the Amazons and the Apples. They're kind of just inching their way into that market. Most of the activity there has been done by the companies that have been playing in the smart home for the last 10 years. The small companies that are making door locks and glass breakage sensors and so on. The folks who are in the Zigbee Alliance and Z-Wave and now in the Thread area and BLE, they really understand low power and what's necessary to do that. And so we probably need some industry cooperation and maybe some standards to bridge the platforms with these low power devices.
Well, Lee, I'm delighted that Incisor TV has the opportunity to have these discussions with IHS on a regular basis. We're going to be meeting again in 6 months' time at the European Roundtable, and let's see how things have moved on by then.
Well, thank you, Vince. It's been a pleasure.